When I was a kid, this week's parsha, or at least an element of it, always grabbed my imagination. In particular, the Ner Tamid. It says right there in the Torah portion, there is this candle of light, of lamp, of whatever Ner, however you want to translate that, Tamid. I always used to hearing it translated as eternal light. And I had this idea in my imagination, wow! You mean this thing's been burning forever? They turned the switch on with that, like back in the time of Moses or whatever? That thing has been lit up forever? Wow! That's pretty cool. Of course, any of our Nerot Tamid that we have here in synagogues and the like probably were not flipped on with a light switch going all the way back to the time of Moshe. But that word, tamid, is an interesting one in the way it sits in this week's parasha and in the Zachor reading. A little bit later in the Torah portion, we have another tamid. Did anybody catch what the other tamid is? What's the thing that we call the tamid a little bit later in this parasha? Not the lamp. What's that? It was your portion too. I hate it when that happens. No, the thing that later on gets lifted up as a tamid is a kind of offering. Which then, if you ask the 8-year-old me, who is so excited about an eternal lamp, eternal flame, this eternal candle that's been burning since the time of Moshe, so what, is it like an animal that we shecht like forever? Always? Ew.
What kind of shul did you go to?
Didn't go to that kind of shul, I'll tell you that much. Conservative synagogue in Durham, North Carolina. No, we were not always shechting. But it's the same word of tamid. And yet, tamid doesn't get translated as eternal there, forever. It gets translated as regular, routine, with some repetition. There's some piece of turning and returning to it, but it's not like every second of every day, like the eternal flame that we have up here. And I love that contrast between the routine offering and what routine or regular candle. It doesn't sound nearly as impressive. I'll put it like that. And no, my 8 or 9-year-old self wouldn't have translated that. Eternal, the always flame. We're going to wind up in a really interesting place around always and forever. We wind up there by virtue of Shabbat Zachor. We wind up there by virtue of this piece. Remember what Amalek did to you in your journey after you left Egypt, how undeterred by fear, Amalek happened to Israel on the march when you were famished and weary and cut down all the stragglers in your midst. Therefore, when God grants you safety from all the enemies around you in the land that God is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. That wasn't even me. It says that at the end of it. Do not forget. Don't forget. You're not supposed to forget. Our Mefarshim have a field day with this. I'm in the Mikraot Gedolot. The Mefarshim are a set of medieval commentators that I'm exploring in the way that they unpack this. I shared some of the more bonkers interpretations with Rabbi Bronwyn Mullen, our cantor, earlier this morning. If you want to hear some of those, you can find me at Kiddush Lunch. But I'm not talking about the truly bonkers, far-out interpretations. We have a few really interesting ones, though. Rashi, in a way that I had not encountered before this, Rashi wants to tack the whole Amalek episode, the tribe of Amalek attacking the Israelites after they've left Egypt, and it's some evil thing, and God says, forever and ever, blot them out, destroy them. Rashi connects it with what comes immediately before it, which we did not see in this week's reading, which is about honest weights and measurements. Rashi says, you had better employ fair and honest weights and dealings and be fair and honest with people. Otherwise, this Amalek thing might happen to you. What a strange reading of it. The eternal enemy was somehow provoked by, I don't know, the gas pump shaving off fractions of a penny every time you were filling up? That's far out to me. A Barbanel, Lori's thrilled here that we have a Barbanel, an ancestor. What's your relation to a Barbanel? Descendant. Lori Barbanel, who is descended of a Barbanel, doesn't go that direction. Barbanel says, Amalek attacked for no reason at all. And that's the chief wrongdoing, and that's the reason you have to remember it, that there's no justification for it. You can't launch an unjustified, unfair assault on some random people under bad or wrong or no pretenses. Barbanel says that's what it's about. It's not about, ripping them off or some kind of business dealing. But sorry? So we are going to, believe it or not, we're actually not going in that direction today of justification of armed conflict in the year 2020. I'm trying to remember when that year started. Was it 23 or 24? 23, I think. War in Ukraine. We're not going to go in that direction today. Nachmanides takes us in another direction. And this has to do with the always. The tamid. That thing that's the eternal light, but it's only the regular or, routine offering. Nachmanides wants to link this piece with the retelling of what happened with Miriam. Miriam, Moses' sister. A couple of chapters ago in Devarim, even though we're in Exodus, our Zachor reading takes us into Devarim. A couple of chapters ago, we have this retelling of Miriam being jealous, speaking against her brother, whatever, her brother Moses, however you want to drash this thing, and then she was stricken with these snow white scales. Something bad happened to her. And Nachmanides says this is the same thing here when we're retelling Amalek as if we would retell Miriam. We're actually telling something that we don't want to tell. We're actually telling a story. In the case of Miriam, we're saying something unkind against a prophet, somebody who is righteous in her own right. It's bad that we retell that. We ought to not retell that, Nachmanides says. Somehow we do. Somehow we do tell this story to our children for generations. Even though we ought to conceal it in all rights, somehow we keep telling it. And no less the Amalek piece as well. We keep telling it. Even though Nachmanides says we actually probably shouldn't. It's not the kind of thing we want to glorify, that we want to bring to the forefront, that we want to make a big deal out of and celebrate or whatever. It's not a good thing. In point of fact, the Torah portion even says, blot out the memory. This is the whole contradiction in it. You're supposed to remember to forget the whole Amalek thing. There is a tension and a contradiction in the very act of memory here. But Nachmanides says there's something wrong with it to begin with, that it's doing something to us by remembering. I think that's really interesting, this idea that remembering Amalek is doing something negative to us that Nachmanides from the medieval era would just as soon have us conceal. And this gets to the importance of stories, of the stories that we tell, and how we link to them and how we relate to them. Why do we tell the Zachor piece this week of all weeks? What's the connection here? Somebody? Anybody? Haman. Thank you. Yes, boo. Haman, the Agagite. And you see them connect Agag, the king of Amalek, in the Haftarah that Hamar Osnat read for us. And if you were, paying attention, keeping score there, you see Samuel actually draw his sword and cut down Agag in real time in that parsha. And so somewhere along the lines, there is a editorial decision that this remembrance somehow ought to link us with Purim, that we ought to keep turning and returning and remembering the Amalek thing as part of Purim. And with Purim, you get a textual piece that supports it, because Haman was an Agagite, theoretically the descendant of Agag, the one who we saw shechted with extreme prejudice in the book of Samuel. But I think Nachmanides is onto something here when Nachmanides says, actually telling harmful stories and hurtful stories can be a damaging thing. Nachmanides says there actually ought to be a prohibition against harmful speech, against speaking of terrible things that cause a great many evils. Nachmanides says we in our own time get tripped up by it and tangled up by it. He's probably talking about the medieval era, but I take his point. That telling the Amalek story renders our history in a certain kind of way. Remember earlier when I was riffing on Mimitzrayim Galatanu? We were redeemed from Egypt. If you tell a story about the Israelites as a people who were redeemed from Egypt, that says something about who you are and your capacity for hope and what it is you can do in the world. If you tell your story as a people that were attacked by surprise, without justification, that takes away a great deal of agency. It sets you on edge. It turns your intentionality and your focus differently. You encounter the neighbors a little bit differently if your story is you're the people of Amalek. And this is where I want to synthesize the reading of Amalek here. Do not forget, lo tishkach, with the Ner Tamid. There are a lot of possibilities for what always means. I think in this case, Tetzaveh gives us two possibilities. We can hold that memory of Amalek. Do we hold it in every waking minute, in every waking hour, always and always upon always eternally? Nachmanides would tell you that's not a healthy thing. That's not a good thing for your sense of what it means to be a Jew in the world. In fact, if you keep internalizing that story about we are hated by everyone at all times, you can justify some terrible, terrible things in the course of it. Nachmanides says that it actually, the telling of that story constitutes itself harmful speech. But we don't elide it. We don't erase it. If we were to eradicate it from our telling entirely, how would we hold our own sense of memory? How would we hold real pain? Suppose we stopped talking about wholesale the Shoah or something like that, pretended it didn't happen. I don't believe that would be inappropriate or a Jewish telling of it. But there is a very, very important piece here, and this is where I want to land on the difference between eternal at every second and every minute and with some regularity, with some routine. It may be important to remember conflict and some of the violence of our ancestors. But if we only remember that, and we are bound by that in every minute of our waking hours, and we take that Amalek story and superimpose it onto our right now, that's going to be really limiting in terms of what kind of future we as a Jewish people can create, what kind of a hope we can ascertain or reach for. As it's said, you don't make peace with your friends, you make peace with your enemies. The Amalek model is not one in which there is peace to be had. And if we deceive ourselves into thinking that every conflict and everything and every problem that we encounter within Judaism is the Amalek in front of us, we've limited not only our capacity for imagination for making the world better, but we've limited what it is we can imagine God doing in terms of Oseh Shalom Bimbaromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, the one who makes peace in the heavens and makes peace in this world right here. Do we elide it and forget it? No, we haven't forgotten it. We're going to tell that story. We're going to tell that story this weekend. If one follows the rabbinic injunction around the Amalek story in Purim, there will be some drinking involved with it. There will be a good deal of satire with it too. Might even be funny. But you have to be careful how you tell that story. You can't forget it, but you also cannot let it be your eternal story and your eternal raison d'etre. It cannot be your reason for being in this world, and everybody around you cannot be Amalek. Remember, don't forget, but be very, very attentive to what tamid means and how it is that we remember and what kind of violence we remember and use to define our direction going forward as a Jewish people. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
We continue at this